Hello, this is Judd Apatow, and welcome to ShowbizMonkeys.com.
Around this town, I'm alright. Around this town, I'm alright. I mean, no consequence when you playing with the fire.
I guess the first thing I want to ask you is you had a very interesting pandemic, just like working on one of the only movies that was allowed to shoot during the pandemic.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was a movie about being stuck in a pandemic. So we made a movie about making a movie about being locked in a global pandemic. So it is pretty much the most meta comedy experience that you can have. It's kind of cool. If you look at the cast, it's just kind of comedy heavyweights. So for me, it was like going back to school, really, and just trying to be noticeable in a room full of undeniables. I think that's the best way that I can put it,
Was it almost comforting for you to have something to focus on that wasn't the pandemic? Like you were so focused on like keeping up with everyone else that the pandemic kind of took a back seat for a bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you're in scenes with like Keegan-Michael Key or like Fred Armisen and a bunch of other people, you're just busy watching them. Mm-hmm. So you're like, listen, I need to get my A game together and be in this scene with them while I'm watching them in the scene. So I think it was a healthy level of anxiety where every emotion that you experience between 25 and 35 age, you're experiencing between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., which is just like, I'm amazing. I'm shit. I belong here. I should go home. Just all of that stuff. So yeah.
Wow. And you also recorded a special during that time, just doing crowd work on a Zoom show, which I feel like is two anxiety driving words for a comedian now.
I mean, I wasn't planning to do Zoom shows, and then what ended up happening is, we had a reasonably tough second wave, and there was this fundraising to be done. So I ended up doing these fundraising Zoom shows, and it was terribly uncomfortable and not a great format to do comedy in at all. But we ended up raising money for about 40 different charities for COVID relief. But just to break the ice, I'd ask people, hey, what's the first thing you want to do when the pandemic is over? And then two things started happening, which is people from all over the world started to attend the same show, which you don't normally see, right? So suddenly in my crowd, if there were 800 people on the Zoom call or 500 people on a Zoom call, there's somebody from Costa Rica, somebody from China, somebody from Ireland, and somebody from the UK, and many people from India. So they all just had similar global common ground. And I'm like, this feels like a moment. Yeah. So by about show 4 or 5, I started putting these little cameras on in my room and just being like, I'm just going to ask this one question. What's the first thing you want to do when the world opens again? And it turned into that. But it started out entirely as a fundraising exercise. There was no plan to make a special at all. And then we released the special on my website to raise money. And once it was done doing that is when Netflix bought it. So that's kind of how that went.
Is there a way that you ended up prepping for that? Almost like emotional strength training? Because I found doing Zoom shows, keeping the energy level up for myself and that weird panic mode when you think you're bombing because you can't hear anything. You almost have to ignore that.
I think for me, like I made sure to have like at least 50 people unmuted on a Zoom call. So I wouldn't do it unless I could hear them. I just refused flat out. And then no, it was just, what was weirdest to me was you really, when people pay to come out and see you, they're on their best behavior, in their best clothes, and they spend a ton of cash to come see you, right? But to see people at their worst behavior, which is really, it's really a reality check in how little you can really hold their attention span, right? When they're ball scratching and, cooking while they're looking at you, or, just kind of on the shitter or something else, where you're like, oh my God, this is really how my Netflix special is consumed, for instance, right? You give yourself these illusions of being this grand act that people come out and see. No, right. People are watching you on Netflix or on YouTube, just sitting at home, scratching their balls or making a sandwich or, on the crapper. So it's a nice reality check. It's pretty humbling for comics to do those shows, I think.
Yeah. Well, I definitely feel some of that.
Yeah.
I was also just wondering, because I can't think of too many people I would get to ask this to, because obviously you have a big following in India, but you've also broken over into the North American market. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What does it take to be able to break into an international market? Or is there certain things you have to do or keep in mind?
I know. Everything that I've tried to do or that I planned to do didn't work out in terms of, and then certain things did. And I can explain that. You know, when I started out saying, okay, I'm going to start trying to make Americans laugh. And it's because it came from a place of, I felt like I wasn't taking stand-up seriously enough. And I was like, okay, I'm really going to give this a year of my life and go where people watch stand-up. So for a year of my life, I took off from Bollywood and took off from India, where one was, you know, touch wood, God has been kind. I was doing larger rooms and, you know, really big venues, and just kind of went to Huntsville, Alabama and Charlotte, North Carolina, and, you know, just to the Improv or to Zanies, and kind of spent a year trying to figure that out. Right. And the intention ended up being, okay, what do Americans want to hear about? And then Netflix happens to the world, not to me in general, you know, and then you realize, oh shit, people don't want you to tell them what's funny to them. They want you to take themselves somewhere new. You know, every culture has their own palatable version of Indian comedy, right? Or their own local version of Indian comedy, which is, you know, represents the diaspora, so to speak. So, you know, in Canada, there's a Russell Peters. In India, there's a Hassan Minhaj or an Aziz Ansari. In the UK, there are many comics, but you're coming in from now India, 1.3 billion India. So trying to do that wouldn't work. So suddenly people were like, no, take me to India. Tell me a more authentic story. Like Chappelle can take you and me to Ohio. I've never been to Ohio, right? I don't know the first thing about Ohio, but I'm willing to go. So why wouldn't somebody be willing to come to Mumbai, you know, or to Delhi? So strangely enough, I ended up having to tell a more authentic story and to do me more, trying to break into the West.
I mean, especially working with Judd Apatow, he loves that stuff. He seems to gravitate to people who are just 100% giving out their truth. Did you pitch him anything while you were on the bubble?
No, we're talking about stuff, but that's exactly how it came about. You know, I had auditioned for another role and I didn't end up getting it. It went to a lovely actor called Samson Koyo, who plays the wellness expert in the movie. Okay. And I just kind of got this call from Judd just being like, hey man, I think you're interesting and I think you have a strong voice. Come and do this movie and we'll just improv the entire thing. So that's what we did. We did, you know, 25 days of improv. I didn't have a line in the script before the movie.
Oh, really?
One line.
Wow.
Yeah. Like me and Maria Bakalova, we were added, I think, to 2 weeks before the movie. And so we just showed up without a single line in the movie, and Judd just kind of captained us through this improv that you see on screen.
That's amazing. The more I find out, the more stress I now understand was happening the whole time.
Yeah.
I guess to jump back to what you were saying, do you find big differences in your South Asian audiences on different continents?
No, not so much. I think comedy crowds are comedy crowds now, and it boils down to rooms and energies rather than sort of nationalities. I think, you know, they're coming in for one of three reasons. Either because they want to just have a laugh. For a lot of my audience, they come in because they want to go home. You know, this is the first time they've been in a room with 2,000 other Indians in sometimes 10 years. And they're like, it feels good to feel this and go home again. And then some people are just coming in because they've seen a Bollywood movie and they've never been to a comedy show before, ever. So for them, it's a completely new experience as well. So it's kind of a mix of different things now. There's not like one type of audience. And, you know, earlier on, it used to be 90% Indian, and now it's like 60% Indian and 40%, you know, American or Canadian, which is again, an interesting mix.
You've said on like past interviews, and by that I mean like on Conan, you said before, like you've always wanted to be a romantic lead, but that Bollywood and our perception of romantic comedies is still very far apart. Do you still feel that way? Do you feel like Bollywood is coming?
We're coming where?
More North America, like blowing up.
No, I don't think North America is a destination for Bollywood, honestly, and I don't think they care. I'm sorry if that sounds arrogant, but it's the biggest film industry in the world. We release like 7 films a weekend, so they're busy. Is the best way to put it. But no, I think. In fact, the reverse is true. More and more Americans are leaning into the spectacle of escapism. And I think you get a little bit of that from us as well. What I always laugh about is, Americans for the longest time, they'd be like, oh my God, these Bollywood movies, they're so fantastical and they're these huge costumes and these big revenge plot lines and everything's unrealistic. Then you go and make like 150 Avengers movies, which are the only movies that work in theaters right now. They're Bollywood movies. Avengers are Bollywood movies, basically.
Right. Or the, what is it now? Fast and the Furious is about to be in space and everyone's just fine with it.
I mean, shouldn't it just be Furious at this point? Because once you get to space, isn't like nothing fast? So they should just call the movie Floating and Furious, right?
Yeah.
Or just like, I don't know.
I read a thing that you actually, you studied method acting in the States.
I did, yeah. Yeah. It was in Galesburg, Illinois, the mecca of civilization as we know it. It was a fun program.
Do you find that you've used a lot of like Stanislavski in your the way you present yourself on stage?
Oh, yeah, hell yeah. Don't you find a lot of Stanislavski on Friday night at the Improv?
Yeah.
If nothing else, I think it just gives you a little bit of comfort in terms of taking a risk on stage. That's about it. Nothing else. Like sometimes comedians will take pains to have economy of words and really smart writing, and then sometimes we'll hold back on delivery. Like we hold ourselves back, and sometimes if you're a very dry comic, but you're trying to put an hour together and you want that one sort of blip in the hour that is a slightly more histrionic delivery or a slightly more, sometimes comics, we feel insecure about doing that. And I think doing a little bit of acting just helps open you up for those things, and it ends up giving your special a little more dynamics, in terms of quieter moments and louder moments as well. So I think it helps with that. But apart from that, no, nothing else.
I ended up getting influenced by a dance teacher at the time, and then I got made fun of by the comics. Like, you're really using the space. It's not like I was pirouetting. They're just like, why are you moving at all?
Yeah.
So, just for laughs, in Toronto, a lot of years, it's sort of like, it's a very comedy nerd style festival.
Oh, yeah?
Where you can see a lot of like comedians just starting their new hour, and you can really see how the sausage gets made. What stage are you at now? What are you working on that you're thinking of bringing this year?
You're going to see as finished a show as you can get, because it's done 29 countries, and I do it in Toronto, and then I film it the week after. So it's literally the finished special.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm in Toronto, I think on the 30th or something. And then I literally film it on the 7th in New York City. So if it ain't ready, I'm in a bad, I'm pretty screwed. You know what I mean? By then. So you're going to see a very finished show in that sense.
Okay. You have this amazing work ethic. I'm just wondering, like, what were your goals starting out in stand-up comedy? And do you have goals left for yourself right now?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I mean, there are bucket list venues that we all want to play. And I think every comedian tells themselves that, and then the dodgiest venue in the world ends up feeling better than those venues that you've always had on your bucket list. Right. Yeah. I just really want to get good at this, and get better and better at this. God's been very kind in that one can tour enough to pay the bills, but also one can tour enough to take a month off and just work the Comedy Cellar, or take a month and just do the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, right. Where you're not going to make any money. You're just going to lose money, but it helps your development, and you get to see great art and get to put yourself through the ringer. And so I'm freshly arrived at that stage where I can take these risks with my time. So that's what I'm kind of doing right now. Any stage is a good stage, and whatever pushes me to be better.
That sounds very present. If I have a last question, it's if you've been doing a lot of press lately, is there a question you wish someone would ask you?
No. I'm going to be honest because, there's of course, like, especially when you're talking to press abroad, there's a lot of like, oh, it's so different for us and for you and this and that. Like, I'd love for like one reporter to be like, listen, I know everything about India. You don't have to tell me a damn thing. And I'm like, yes. Now that's a great, but we'll get there, I think.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, man.
This has been great.
All right.
Have a good one.
Cheers, man. Thanks.